Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Please give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Great, thank you, Anthony. Okay, awesome. All right, so first sound check out of the way. Okay. While I'm continuing to get things set up, what I would like you to do is to take out your George Washington Gomez book. Okay, we are now on the second week that we are reading this. Yes, of course, you have your final draft for essay one due tomorrow. It is about the house on Mango Street, a different book, but we cannot delay. We need to jump into George Washington Gomez. Last week, you were supposed to read about the first 25 pages. And each week from here on out for the semester, you're reading 20 pages of this book, somewhere around there, okay? The reading schedule is posted on the syllabus. So there shouldn't be any confusion. You should continue to check the syllabus module, and the page in the syllabus module you want to check is the one that says the reading schedule. Okay, so go ahead and start reading that while I get a few more things set up here in the class. I'll be with you in just a second. Okay, so a little study tip while you're reading. Something that I learned when I was an undergraduate. One of the English classes I was taking, we were reading what are called classical American literature. We were reading like Nathaniel Hawthorne and Moby Dick, and that stuff was written like 200 years ago, okay? So the language in there, you know, while it is English, it's a different kind of English, okay? So we talked in this class about improving our vocabulary. The language in Sandra Cisneros' The House on Mango Street, I think is more accessible, probably easier to understand, and there's also less of it. I mean, just look at how big George Washington Gomez is, right? Americo Paredes is a different style of writer, probably a little bit more in the older style, okay? He spends a lot of time detailing the scene, the landscape, right? Cisneros, on the other hand, lets your imagination kind of fill in, right, the gaps. Well, when we're going to have more language, we're going to be exposed probably to words that we don't know. As you are reading, what I recommend, okay, and this is what I learned to do in that class with Hawthorne and Melville, was, you know, I would take my notebook, all right, and the teacher said, the professor, really, really wise woman, she was awesome, said, go to the back of your notebook and start making a list of the words that you want to know, okay? The words that are important to the story, right? They help you understand what's happening. Or just personally, you think you've heard that word before. And for some reason, it strikes you as significant, okay? So as you're reading, make a list, write down the words that you want to know. I don't recommend going and looking them up while you are reading. But what I would do is write the page number next to the word, okay? After you've given yourself some time to read, that way you get into the flow of reading, you know, trust yourself, you'll be able to make general sense of what's happening. But if you want that detailed, specific sense of what's happening, go back and look up some of those words that you wrote down here on the list at the back of your notebook, okay? So that is just one little tip for improving your vocabulary. Make a list, look up the words after you're done reading. All right, so it's very important for me to say that you all are enrolled in a hybrid class. And since you're enrolled in a hybrid class, that means you are expected to attend the in-person part of the class. Because of COVID, I have spaced out our class into 2 small groups. When it is your turn to come in, you're expected to come in unless you are sick or you think you've been exposed to someone who has COVID, okay? Those are the only reasons why you should not be coming in. If you are experiencing those things, please send me an email and say, hey, professor, I know I'm scheduled to come in. I'm not going to be able to pass the health screening. I think I might have been exposed, something like that. Communicate to me. If you're not experiencing symptoms though, and you don't think you've been exposed to anyone, you should be here, okay? It's a required part of our learning, all right? With that being said, if there was any misunderstanding about that, I want to clear that up now. You're required to be here when you are scheduled to attend, unless you are sick or think you have been exposed. Does anyone have any questions about that policy now? Remember, the even numbered weeks are for Esperanza and the odd numbered weeks are for group Gualinto. So this is an even numbered week. Esperanza was supposed to show up this week. Next week, it will be Gualinto. All right. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, please share those with me. You can email me and we can address them that way. All right. Now let's move on to the reflection question that I have for you. And Heidi, I'll make sure to write it up on the board. Okay. All right. So for those of you at home, if you go to the home page of the week 6 module, you look at the bottom, it says guiding questions. What makes for a good leader? How can an individual be a leader in a community? So please respond to that question now as a free write. I will check in with you and get your sense of what you think makes for a good leader. As you are writing this reflection, I think it's a really good idea to give us some examples, okay, of characteristics that make for a good leader. And if there are people that you know that fit the bill, please tell us. Those people can be personal, they can be people in your life that you've met, but they could also be celebrities, people that are famous that we might all know and have experienced their leadership in some ways, okay? So right now, please respond to the reflection question. I'm going to write that into the chat, and then I am going to put it on the board. All right, I will check in with you in just a few minutes for your responses. As you are writing your reflection, I'll be taking attendance. Please unmute yourself and let me know that you are here. Okay, Maria Alonso.
Here.
Great, good morning. Yahaira,
Good morning. Yeah.
Yulisa. Yulisa. Okay. Heidi, good morning. Caitlin. Caitlin. Brianna.
Here, good morning.
Karina.
Here, good morning.
Evelyn. Evelyn. Anthony.
Here.
Hello. Lisbeth.
Good morning.
Morning. Thank you. Rachel.
Here.
Good. Thank you. Crystal. Crystal. All right. Sarah.
Here.
Morning. Alexis.
Here.
Good morning. Angelina.
Here.
Morning. Joshua.
Here, good morning.
Good morning. Amanda.
Here.
Amanda. Hey, Amanda. Fabian.
Here.
Thank you. Yesenia.
Here.
Hey, thank you. Okay, awesome. All right, we got a little bit over 2 minutes. Please gather your thoughts and be prepared to share them. Okay, there it is. All right, so feel free to unmute yourself or type your responses into the chat. Right now, what I'd like to do is brainstorm with you. What makes for a good leader? What are some qualities or traits that we would expect to see?
Confidence.
Confidence, okay, great, thank you.
Someone who has knowledge.
Knowledge,
Responsibility.
responsibility, okay, cool, hold on. So confidence, knowledge, responsibility, awesome.
Good communication skills.
Supportive and encouraging.
Awesome, these are excellent. Communication, supportive, encouraging. Great, excellent. Are there any other outstanding qualities that we should include?
Integrity.
Integrity.
Accountability.
Man, you guys thought about this. I love it. Integrity, accountability. Heidi, how about yourself? Anything we should add up here?
I put is not afraid of confrontation.
Not afraid of confrontation. I like that. I mean, I don't like confrontation, but I like that that's a characteristic of a leader. That's great. Where can I put it? Not afraid. Okay, so that last one, I don't know if you can see my handwriting, is not afraid of confrontation. Okay. These are a lot of great traits that we have up here. What do you guys think of the ones that we have up here? Which one do you think might be the most important? Go ahead and vote in the chat. That might be an easier way for me to kind of take a quick little poll here.
Good communication is a good one.
Good communication. How many of you agree? If you think good communication's most important, please put it into the chat. If you think something else is more important, please put that there. Okay. Support meeting, yeah. Okay. All right, so what I'm seeing here, good communication. I'm seeing a few for confidence. Okay. We can play this game for the rest of class, right? Like looking at, what makes for a good leader. But what I wanted to share with you here is that this is a process for how we can make opinions more academic. Okay. This is what we'll call later in the class, making a claim of value. Okay. So you guys have been making claims of fact. Who is Esperanza? Well, that's not really a claim, but how is she developing? She's this way in the beginning, she's this way at the end, right? We can look and support that with evidence. But how do you debate with someone's opinion? Okay. It's a little bit different. Like, is this a good film or a bad film, right? Is this something that we should believe in or not? Well, one way that you can approach this, right, is you list, okay, your criteria, right? What are the qualities, okay? And then you create a hierarchy. Well, what's the most important one, right? And then we apply it, okay? We see how does that fit, right? So like if we were to take this and apply this to Esperanza, right? Do you got, what qualities of leadership does Esperanza maybe embody here? Anyone have any thoughts on that? Well, let's start with the first one, since this was one that that was proposed and some of us voted for. Do we think that Esperanza is good at communicating? What do you guys think?
Not at first. I think she was more shy and scared at first.
Okay, shy and scared, right? And so that's kind of related to what you were saying about confidence, right, Rachel?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's at first, she lacks some of these characteristics that we associate with being a leader, right? She struggles with her communication, okay? We could debate about that, right? What would good communication look like, okay? And we can see that she's shy, right? Well, that is kind of at the other end of the confidence spectrum, okay? We can also do this, and I encourage you guys to track this, especially with the character Gualinto from George Washington Gomez. Gualinto's father, Gumersindo, in the very first section of the story says that he wants his son to be a leader of his people, right? Well, that claim that this desire that he expresses is one that we have to be prepared to kind of think through. Well, what does that mean to be a leader of someone's people? Okay. And I think these are some really good characteristics to start with. What I encourage you to do is write these down. Keep that free write that you just did on leadership close to you when you're reading. It's very early in the story. We haven't even fully met Gualinto yet. He's a baby right now, right? And by the time you're getting into this week's reading, I think he starts to become like a little boy. We mostly are meeting his father, Gumersindo, and Feliciano, his uncle, right? And those are important. Feliciano especially is a very important character because as we know right away, Gumersindo is killed by the Rinches, the Rangers, right? And you know, yeah, so anyway, keep in mind these characteristics. We're gonna test this. We're gonna see what kind of a person Gualinto becomes. And I want us to study what are the life experiences that might cause him to have these traits or not have these traits, okay? All right. I would love to hear some actions and examples, but I think at this point, I'm gonna hold off on that because we've got a paper that's due tomorrow and I wanna make sure I'm spending time dealing with questions that we have related to that. So I'm just gonna say here to consider the actions of Esperanza. Okay, would you put her in the example of the leadership, right? We have read her story. Which of these maybe apply to her? Which ones maybe don't? And then the other one, obviously, is Gualinto. We're at the very beginning of his story. So that's a huge question mark there, right? We won't really get a sense of who he is we'll start to get a sense of who he is over the next few weeks. Great suggestions. Now, this idea of leadership is something of a bridge between both stories, okay? And it helps you to see the theme for this class, right, which is education, okay? We know that Esperanza is struggling with school in different ways, okay? With her academics and decisions that she makes. Gualinto is going to experience similar things too, right? So we want to pay attention to what are these things that promote education, okay, for Gualinto. What are things that get in the way of education for him too, all right? Okay, so let's start to focus on the task at hand, right, which is your paper that's coming up, the final draft that would best be submitted by tomorrow. Remember a couple of policies that reduce some pressure. You are allowed to submit this late, okay? And I think the more important one is you can redo this, okay? So I say that, I emphasize that second one because some of us get into this perfectionistic mindset. And you don't need to be an A student to have perfectionism, okay? But recognize that you have a lot to learn, and in the area that I can help you with, it's writing, right? I can help you better when you submit something, okay? So do your best, okay, within a reasonable amount of time, okay? I would say that's tomorrow, maybe the day after, all right? Turn in something, okay, within that time period. Turn in the best draft that you can, okay? And then let me do my job, which is to evaluate what you've written. Once I've evaluated it, then we can create a roadmap together. All right, these are strengths. Keep doing these things here, okay? These are areas for improvement. This is where we got to get better, okay? So that's my last little rah-rah speech for trying to get it in, okay, by tomorrow. As far as what do you actually have to do, obviously, the last few weeks of lecture have explained that. The thing that I'm thinking of right now that's not up on the board, please make sure to write a conclusion, okay? Even though the conclusion is a small part of your grade, it's only worth 5 points. You can't afford to not have a conclusion, okay? Then you would get 0 points for that. The difference between an A conclusion and a B or a C conclusion really isn't that much. It's maybe a point that separates those things. But you guarantee you get an F on that conclusion section if you don't write one in there, okay? Now, this week I wrote a lecture on what are the elements of a conclusion. I want to emphasize the last one right now, which is making a prediction, okay? So I'll share my screen here for a second. Okay, we're back on the home page for the course. And Heidi, I don't want to put down the screen just yet because of the lesson plan and this activity, but in a few minutes, I'll make sure to do it so we're on the same page. You can see if you select the week 6 module, we go down, should be moving automatically, but I think it's a little slow in here. I don't know how that happened. Okay, so the lecture page is titled Wrapping Things Up, the conclusion. There is a pre-write in there that I encourage you to do, just because it'll force you to remember to write a conclusion. Okay, it's this pre-write here at the bottom, making a prediction. What it asks you to do is to anticipate or to predict, what do you think will happen to Esperanza after the novel ends? Okay, this does not need to be a full page long, okay? If anything, 1 or 2 sentences, 3 sentences at the most is just fine for your prediction, okay? Your conclusion should not be long, okay? The long paragraphs, the developed paragraphs should be your introduction and your body paragraphs, because that's where you're making the most claims and you're providing support. So please do not use your conclusion to try to meet the minimum page length, okay? It's a very clear sign that you're short on evidence and you're short on points being made in your argument. However, you do need a conclusion, and I do want you to make a prediction. What do you think is going to happen to Esperanza after the story ends, okay? This is preparing you for a good skill, and one that I think is in a more fun way, which is to look at trends and patterns of the past to make predictions about the future. That's making analytical inferences, okay? But we're going to do it in a more fun way here. So the prediction has to be consistent with the analysis of Esperanza you've been doing, okay? If you're saying she grows in this one direction, okay, good. Now let's imagine that she continues to grow in that way or to practice those things. What would be an example of one thing that she would probably do after the story ends, okay? So you're demonstrating more logic and analysis when you're making a prediction, and it's a relevant prediction to what you have been studying, what you've been tracking with her, okay? Does anyone have any questions about making a prediction? Or about writing the conclusion?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, okay, let's do this. Let's move to run-ons. I'm going to give you my Happy Meal version of this lecture. And then we can always go into more detail if that is something that you would like. Okay. So remember that a complete sentence has a subject, a verb, and the ability to stand alone. We reviewed that when we talked about sentence fragments a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to write 2 sentences on the board, and we're going to start to break these things down. And we're going to apply it to this idea of what exactly is a run-on. Okay, so for those of you at home, can you please give me a thumbs up if you can see these two sentences? Great, Rachel, thank you. Amanda, Yulisa, Yahaira, others. Good, thank you, Senya and Karina. Okay, Anthony, thank you. All right, so let's see, I want to get back to my view so I can see it. And Heidi, you can see this okay, right? Okay, so to go back to our definition of a sentence, we need a subject. Subjects are usually nouns or pronouns. Nouns are persons, places, or things, right? And you're going to probably have multiple nouns in a sentence. So we want the star of the sentence. Who's doing the acting? Who's the action, right? Well, in this case, it's the reader, okay? The reader is the subject of this first sentence. I'm going to make it even smaller. I'm just going to say reader, okay? That's our noun that's controlling the whole sentence.
Professor Gardner?
Yeah.
Do you think you can control the camera manually? Because it's kind of, the camera is
Constantly
going
moving.
all over the place.
Yeah, that's because I'm constantly moving. Okay, yeah, I will manually control it. Thank you. All right, so while I'm getting this set up, what I'd like you to do is then think, what's the verb in this sentence? Okay, what's the next part that makes this a complete sentence? Okay, Ileana, can you help me out here? Is that good?
Yeah, and maybe if you could point it more to the left. And then up. Oh, sorry, the other way. Yeah, and then upwards.
How's that?
I think that's good.
Okay, I can zoom in
Yeah.
more too.
That's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So we have our subject, the reader. Okay, now we need our verb. Verbs usually express action or being. Okay, so the word in here that expresses action that's related to our subject is follows. Okay, so in this way we can see we've got two elements. Okay, but for it to be a complete sentence, it has to be able to stand alone. And remember, there are those special words that we call subordinate conjunctions, okay, like because or while. And those are good words, but when we put them at the beginning of a word group, it's going to make them dependent or subordinate, okay? We don't have those words here, so we're good. This is a complete sentence, okay? All right, so what I want you all to do is to take a look at this one. He attempts to become a writer. What do you think is the subject of this second sentence? You can unmute or type it into the chat. Heidi, feel free to jump in too. Hello. You're on Zoom? Okay. Yeah, do you have a wristband? Oh, please go check in and then come back on. Thank you. Okay, anyone, type it in. What do you think is the subject of that sentence? He attempts to become a writer. What's the subject? Remember, subjects are nouns or pronouns.
He?
Yeah, he is our subject. This is a pronoun. Okay, it's referring to whoever our writer is here, the young man. Okay. Now, what would be the verb?
Attempts.
Attempts. Okay, great, thank you. All right. So again, same thing. We don't have any of those subordinate conjunctions, no because or although or while. There's many of those words. And there's a list that I posted to the week 3 module, so you can look at it there if you're uncertain as to what could count. Nonetheless, we have 2 independent clauses, 2 complete sentences. They can stand alone. Right now, things are grammatically correct, but this is when we get into trouble. Okay. I'm just checking the chat. Thank you. See that period right there? When it's missing, okay? That's a run-on. When we have two things that could stand alone, all right? And there is nothing there joining them. The reader follows the story of a young man. He attempts to become a writer, okay? That needs to be separated properly, okay? And right now, there is no separation. So that's one example of a run-on. So the first way, or one way, I'm going to write these solutions on the board. What I wrote on the board is fixes for run-ons. First one, okay, use a period, all right, make 2 complete sentences. It is the simplest thing to do. And I want to stress this. Some of us had issues with fragments in the mini essay. Just about everyone who submitted a mini essay had issues with run-ons, okay? In some cases, I pointed them out, all right? In other cases, I didn't want to stress you out, all right? But run-ons is an area of improvement for the majority of this class, okay? And you're not alone. That's how it is with my Tuesday class. That's how it is with every freshman composition class, okay? This is an area for improvement. That's why I do this at the beginning of the semester, okay? So use a period, make 2 complete sentences. All right, another way to fix this, okay, is to use a semicolon, okay? The semicolon can only be used to join 2 independent clauses together. There has to be an independent clause in front of it. There has to be an independent clause after it. You cannot end a paragraph with a semicolon, okay? So it's not the same thing as a period, okay? It is a bridge that joins independent clauses together. Thank you very much. All right, so use a semicolon to join independent clauses together. The third way. Now, this is where students get confused, okay? And this is probably the most common run-on that I see. Students will oftentimes just put a comma in between 2 independent clauses, okay? The comma is not enough, okay? It's not strong enough to bond 2 independent clauses. You need a comma and a fanboy, okay? Has anyone heard of the fanboys before? Yes, yeah, Heidi, you have, yeah?
Yes.
Is it Elisa? No. Amanda, thank you, Amanda. Amanda, you've heard of it too? Can you guys remember any of the fanboys? That's okay. That's why we're doing it. I didn't learn about the fanboys until I got to graduate school, okay? That's ridiculous, right? But I don't know, that's why I went through the training. All right, so for those of you at home, the fanboys are also conjunctions, but they're a different kind of conjunction. These ones, I do think you should memorize, okay? It's easy, it's manageable, right? In this, when there's only 7 of them. Subordinate conjunctions, it's crazy. There's a lot, okay? This is pretty simple though. Fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so, okay? So if you're gonna use a comma to join two independent clauses together, you gotta stick one of these guys right after the comma, okay? Now, you can't just pick any of them, you've gotta pick the one that makes sense, okay? For is a way of saying because, okay? For they tell me so, okay? Right? That's what for means. It's like because. I don't think because works here. The reader follows the story of a young man because he attempts to become a writer. Not quite, okay? And is a general one, okay? It catches everything. The reader follows the story of a young man and he attempts to become a writer, okay? It's okay, but you know what? Grammatically, it's correct. I would not mark that wrong. That would not be a run-on if we did this, okay? Nor does it work because that's when we're saying that something else is not an option. You can neither do this nor that, okay? That doesn't really apply here. But implies contrast and opposition, right? Two things that are different. So I don't think that applies here either. The reader follows the story of a young man, but he attempts to become a writer. No. Or suggests that something else is an option. And by the way, I have written all of these down in the PowerPoint lecture on run-ons. Okay, so I'm doing a quick review of them. Okay, but I translate what each of these means. Yet means that there is something open-ended, that something else could happen or could be included as an option. So is one that implies a result, okay? You know, we do this so we can be, right, we attend class so we can do well and learn, okay? So this implies a cause-effect relationship. All right. So here we have your fanboys, pair them with a comma, okay? And you will have avoided a run-on, okay? When used well, these things, conjunctions actually help you write with style, okay? So I want us to start practicing using not only these conjunctions, but the other kind too, the subordinate conjunctions. We just have to use them properly. They add style, sure, that's great. But what they help is they help the reader understand how our ideas connected, okay? So I'm gonna do a quick example and yeah, actually, so let's do another one. Okay, so I just wrote on the board two super small independent clauses, okay? And I'll type them into the chat just in case you can't see them. Ileana, thank you for writing that into the chat, okay? All right, so I just typed it into the chat right now. Another example I wrote on the board. He sits, she stands. I do this because I want you all to get it out of your head that a run-on is a long sentence. That's not correct at all, okay? Run-ons are not about how long or how short sentences are, okay? Run-ons are about how are they joined together? How are the ideas connected, okay? Grammatically connected. So he sits, she stands. This is a run-on right now. We've got a fused sentence. There's this empty space, nothing joining them, okay? We could put a period there, right? That would work. We could use a semicolon. That would work as well, okay? But now let's get to the fanboys. So we can see how, depending on what we choose, changes the meaning of the sentence, okay? If we say something like, he sits, okay, and she stands, right? We're suggesting somehow that these two things are connected to each other, okay? But the problem with and is that they're really big, broad, general connect. We don't know exactly what the relationship is, right? What if instead of and, I wrote something like but? He sits, but she stands, okay? Right? Now we're saying these two things are related, but in an oppositional way. They're somehow opposed to each other. There's this contrast that we want to acknowledge, right? I mean, think about it if someone is describing the scene of Pledge of Allegiance at a football game, right? He kneels, but he stands, right? That's a big deal when we're putting it in those terms, because now we're suggesting, oh, wait a minute, right? There are two different political views that are being expressed here, okay? And they're opposing in some ways, right? So words matter. Now, the words that I want you to focus on in terms of word choice, learn your conjunctions. They will teach you how to make transitions from one idea to another, okay? Your verbs matter, okay? The actions that we do, okay? The ways that we characterize being, okay? So yes, adjectives are nice, okay? But adjectives can sometimes just be fluff, all right? I can very easily read a paper and see if it's fluff or not. And oftentimes it's the kinds of adjectives that are being used, okay? So when you're making this commitment to improve your vocabulary, okay? One thing that I would really say is be strategic, focus on your conjunctions and know how to use them, right? Okay, and again, I could change this if I were to say he sits, so she stands. Now it's a cause effect thing. Maybe there was only like one seat in the room. The guy took it. Well, so she's got to stand, right? That's very different from and, okay? So be selective with your conjunctions grammatically. Put a comma before your fanboys, okay? And you'll be just fine. So third option, comma and one of the fanboys. All right, and the last option, okay, is subordinate. This is where you could use a subordinate conjunction, okay? The reader follows the story of a young man as he attempts to become a writer. As is one of those subordinate conjunctions, okay? It's one of those words that changes the clause that comes after it. This is no longer an independent clause. Now that we have as in front of it, this is now dependent. It cannot stand alone, okay? If I made this, if I put a period here to finish this sentence and then turn this one into its own sentence, that would be a fragment, okay? All right, but when we put them together, now what we have is a complex sentence because we have two kinds of clauses, an independent clause and a dependent clause, okay? Part of the lecture on run-ons, I introduce you to 4 basic kinds of sentences, okay? When I learned about these, it helped me feel like I had so much more control over my writing because I thought, really, there are just 4 ways of expressing myself, okay? If I can master these 4, I can say anything I want and I can say it with style, okay? We have simple sentences, compound, complex, and compound complex, okay? By the end of the semester, I expect to see a full variety in your writing. Right now, we're just worried about avoiding certain errors. But if you know how to fix the run-ons in all of these ways, you're actually going to put yourself in a position to be able to use all of those different styles, okay? All those different kinds of sentences, all right? So be on the lookout for run-ons in that last stage of writing, okay? Don't worry about it. Like if you're still trying to come up with ideas and look for evidence, forget run-ons. Don't even bother. You got bigger issues, okay? You need to know how to back up your claims. But once you're thinking, all right, this has got to get submitted in the next hour, okay? Hopefully, whatever, I was a student, I was there, okay. Hopefully you give yourself more time than that, okay? But you've got to proofread. Your grammar grade is going to be based on fragments and run-ons, okay? 10%, 10 points of your 100-point paper, okay, is determined by the number of fragments and run-ons you have. So do your best, okay, to look for them. Look, if it turns out that you're still struggling with it, fine. I give you the grade and then we meet and we work on it, okay? And you get better at it on the next paper, okay? But make this your priority, fragments and run-ons. Avoid those as much as you can, okay? Questions at home about fragments or run-ons? Okay, so what I would like you to do right now, while I am here with you, is I want you to work on your papers. So take out your drafts, okay, and start making them better, okay? We're all in different places in the writing process. Some of us haven't started a rough draft yet. Now's the time, do it. Some of us are almost done, okay? We've got our evidence and now we need to think about sentence style. Great. I want you to work on that now, because as you run into things, I'm here, I can answer those questions, okay? So let's take some time right now to work on our papers, okay? Any questions you have about writing, about making claims, support sandwiches, writing introductions, or grammar stuff, fragments or run-ons, please feel free to ask me. You can just unmute yourself, or you can type it into the chat. I'll get it to you that way, all right? If there's anyone that came in later, please let me know so I can mark you as present for today. Yes, yeah. I recommend copying and pasting that question from the prompt and putting it on to the top of your draft. Just to, that way it always keeps you focused, right? What's she like at the beginning? What is her mindset like at the end?
And for the introduction, it would be the context, the problem, and then the thesis.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. And the word I use for thesis is response, to help you think about how these things should be connected, right? It's like, what's preventing Esperanza from developing? Okay. Then your thesis is, okay, but she gets over it and she becomes, you know, something new, right? So think about that thesis as a response to the problem, all right? And then really the hardest part of any paper is crafting that problem, okay? So that's our main thing. And, you know, for the problem, it's got to be related to what she wants, right? If she wants a house, what's preventing her from getting the house, right? Now you can think about that literally, right? Well, she didn't have money. Okay, fine, good. So think about that in terms of her mental development, right? How does she cope with being poor? How does she cope with not having financial resources? The other way you can think about it is, what if the house isn't really a house? What if it's a metaphor, right? The house is this idea. It represents something, right? And that's what she really wants. So how does she cope with not getting that right away? What will she have to do to get that, okay?
And then for each body paragraph, you would have to include the topic sentence and then to support sound.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's a structure that you repeat. So don't be worried about the repetition of it. You're doing it the right way. What shouldn't be repeated is the idea, right? It should be a new stage of development for each paragraph, okay?
How many paragraphs are there?
I think there's not a specific count, but I would say if it's a 4-page paper, your conclusion is probably a quarter of a page. Your introduction is probably like half a page to 3/4 of a page. Introduction should be really well developed, right? So that's like one whole page right there with like MLA header, intro, and conclusion. Now you've got 3 body pages, 3 pages of body paragraphs. So I think 4 is safest for our level of writing right now, okay? It's a concern when students only have 2. That probably means you've got paragraphs that go way beyond 1 page long, okay? So I think about 4 paragraphs is probably safe, okay? Angelina, I'm looking at your question right now. Okay. Angelina, you're talking about if you have 2 support sandwiches in a body paragraph, how do you connect them together? Is that right? Okay. Well, I mean, one way that you can think about it is, I don't want to overwhelm you right now at the moment. You can think about it as you're making a claim, and each claim has 2 forms of support that are related, but each one adds a little something new, right? Like, let's say you were making a claim about Esperanza's mindset at the beginning, okay? And the first support sandwich looks at a cause. Maybe the second support sandwich looks at an effect, right? Like, what's causing her to have this initial mindset? And then the second support sandwich would look at, well, what's a consequence? What's an effect of her having this initial mindset, okay? And that might help you to create some flow by looking at your support sandwiches from a cause effect kind of perspective, okay? Does that make sense? Good. Yeah, I want to reassure you, there is not really a wrong way to do it. What you want to emphasize is that you are adding something slightly new in each support sandwich, even though they are both reinforcing the same major claim, okay? So let's take I'll make sure to pay attention to that when I'm reviewing your paper. And I think when I'm working with something more specific, I can probably provide you with better recommendations, okay? Amanda, did you have another question?
Oh, no, I was sorry, no, how she had it all there. Professor Gardner, for the rough draft, I have it as like an outline. Is it okay if I choose it as like an outline?
Well, if you want me to look at the outline, then yeah, turn it in, okay? Like if you want me to let you know like what I think about where you're moving with the points, that's fine. If you're looking for credit at this point, you know, you're not gonna get credit for that, okay? If you want like attendance credit, you need to turn in two full written pages, okay? And then I will go back to week 5 and I'll give you credit for it, okay? So it just depends on what your purpose is. Heidi, what were you looking for? Attendance credit or were you looking for feedback? For feedback, yeah, then just submit it and email me and say, hey, professor, I submitted a rough draft outline, okay? These are the things I'm worried about, okay? And, you know, let me know, are you worried about the thesis or the topic sentence claims? Like if they are claims or not? Okay, I can do that with you right now. Do you have the rough draft with you?
Yeah.
Okay. So depending on what you, sorry, man, depending on what you feel comfortable with, you can submit it and I can look at it from here. If you're comfortable with me coming and looking over your screen, I can do that. Okay.
So it's because I have the outline like this.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like basically like the introduction and then the concept problem and response. And then I just want to go in and
Plug in stuff.
Yeah.
Then I think that's a great
And then
idea.
do the same thing for the body diagram.
Did you see the pre-write that I had that was essentially doing this?
Yeah.
Good, good, good.
That's good. And then these are my claims, like the 4 body diagram.
Okay, so she doesn't want the same things as other kids in her school. All right, so when we're thinking about want, all right, I think that if we push on it, it can help us get to mindset, okay? So she doesn't want the same things as other kids. How does she feel about not wanting the same things as other kids?
So my major claim was that in the beginning of the book, she felt like an outsider.
Perfect, good, all right, then your reason for that would be
Yeah.
staff. Okay, so don't be afraid to restate that as a topic sentence for the first 5 paragraphs, right? That's what, I mean, you can use different language if you want, but you're emphasizing that she doesn't feel connected to her community. She feels like she doesn't belong. Okay, well, how do you know? Well, because she wants things that are different than what the rest of her neighborhood wants. Okay. All right, prove it. Those questions, that little dialogue that I just kind of rehearsed, I want you to start to internalize that. Okay, what are you trying to prove? She's an outsider. All right, well, how do you know? Okay, well, because she wants different things. All right, prove it. All right, and then you give it a physical example. That's excellent. So revive, so turn that first statement here. That is a reason, okay? Make your claim that she is, I'll go with outsider as like a mindset. You could say lonely or feels disconnected, okay? You choose the words that fit right for you, all right? But we are referring to her mental state, right? Where does she see herself in relationship to others? And she sees herself as being disconnected. You think she's lonely or isolated?
I think disconnected.
Good. Use that. And then apply that same thing to all of the other claims. Are there any other ones here that?
Yeah, this is the second one, the third one, and the fourth.
Okay, now, what's the subject of that sentence? Look at number 2 again. What's the subject of that sentence?
For people.
Yes. What should be the subject of the sentence?
The concept.
Exactly. So good. That's a great example of how we need, this will help us stay focused and on track. Make Esperanza the subject of all of the sentences. Now, yes, we can play with some style, right? You know, as a result of her people being portrayed negatively, Esperanza feels like an outcast. Now we're using complex sentence styles to convey the idea you want to emphasize. Okay? Your independent clause has to always have Esperanza as a subject. But all the stuff around it, okay, like that qualification that you have, that's what we would call that. Okay? That's a dependent clause and it sets up the independent clause. So let's look at that one again, because now I want to think about the idea. So really, the mindset isn't changing. It's still outsider, right?
Yeah.
But, so then we have to ask ourselves, well, so what do you think is being added here? Okay. But, well, how do you see this as being new information? How is this different from what you did in the first paragraph?
Yeah, that's also the thing, because my first three reasons, it was her as an outcast, and then the last one was just like when she changed.
And what did she change to?
I put that she changed into accepting the people, and she finds a sense of belonging.
Does she, okay, so once she accepts her people, she then feels like she belongs?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's very complex. So then let's keep that, what you're saying here, because that's part of this longer road. Does she accept herself? Does she get to that point of self-acceptance? Like, how is it that she moves from feeling like an outsider and feeling like an outcast? Okay, because she does identify as Mexican, Mexican American, right? Her dad's Mexican, right? But she identifies as Mexican American. Does she come to a point where she accepts that about herself?
I think she does.
Okay, so then that's part of the process of belonging. It's, I can accept myself as Mexican American if I first accept that Mexicans are valid, that Mexican Americans are meaningful, right? That they're not, I don't know, whatever you're saying, the book says, that she experiences. All right, so then it sounds like what you're doing here is you're showing the causes for why she feels like an outsider. Cause number one, she wants different things. Cause number two, Mexicans are portrayed and Mexican Americans are portrayed negatively.
Yeah.
Okay, and because she identifies as Mexican American, she feels badly about herself because of this negative portrayal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like if you're watching TV and you see the president of the United States saying bad stuff about Mexican people, right? And you identify as Mexican, you know, that could impact how you see yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's a real thing. Here we have it in the story, right? Good. So keep it, and this is about adjusting the right local language, make Esperanza the focus. And even something as simple as Esperanza feels like an outcast because of the way Mexican people are treated. That's maybe a more simpler way of stating it?
Yeah.
but-
It's just the word.
Yeah, is that true? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess, long story short, Esperanza should be the subject of each of these claims. If you remember that, that will help you revise them to keep tracking her development. Okay, that's very good. I want to see the evidence, but I'll wait. Right now, we got to work with the big ideas, the claims. Okay. Man, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Everyone, I'm going to put this on 360 degrees view so that way you can see me moving around the classroom. I'll do both. You know where I'm at. I haven't left. Rachel, I'm responding to your direct message right now. So just give me another minute. I'll get it out there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, everyone. So a couple of things I wanted to point out, just to preserve privacy. I'll focus more on just some general things that I think could be useful to you from conversations I've had with students here. When you are revising your claims, make sure that the main character, Esperanza, is the subject, right? Now we should be on the same page grammatically with that little grammar lesson we just had. Esperanza should be the subject of all of your topic sentence claims, because what's this paper about? It's about her development. That's what your thesis is about. So as you are reviewing your thesis statements, look for Esperanza's name, okay? Something very literal and direct, like can you put your finger on her name in the first sentence of your body paragraph, okay? Are you making a claim about what she does? The other thing that I want to emphasize is being as specific as you can be with your word choice, okay? This comes up in your claims. This also comes up in your analysis when you're interpreting evidence, okay? So there's a tool that I want to show you in the week 3 module. I created a voice thread called Making Claims Specific and Significant. And right now I'm sharing my screen so you can see the slide. But on the slide number 8, there's this thing called an abstraction ladder, okay? That abstraction ladder helps us to categorize the words we use, okay? At the very top of the ladder is the most abstract level of language. So what does it mean to be abstract? Well, it means that it is something that can refer to many things. Like when we use a word like beauty or life or love, there's lots of things that can be referred to when we're talking about life. Are we talking about human life, or are we talking about non-human animal life? Are we talking about cell life, right? What do you mean exactly? Are we just talking about, oh man, that's life, like bad things happen to you on a daily basis, you have to learn how to cope, right? So what does life mean? That's abstract. But when we have something much more concrete, okay, we go further down the abstraction ladder to level 2. Well, I'm talking about teenagers, or I'm talking about, teenagers who are female, right? That's very specific and concrete, okay? Now, the most specific level is when you're actually using names and proper nouns, right? So like Esperanza, if we were to imagine an abstraction ladder with life at the top, right? Your name, okay, Amanda, Heidi, Daniel, right, would be an example of life at the bottom, okay? And that would shape the different rungs in the middle. So to keep it short, and we'll close out here, I want you to be on the lower end of the abstraction ladder, levels 2 and levels 1, as much as you can. You should be using examples, or specific categories, okay? Esperanza identifies as an adolescent Mexican-American child, okay? That's very specific. And when we bring out those aspects of her identity, that causes us to look for other things in the story, okay? So be specific is the principle I want you to have in mind as you are revising, okay? If you have a question like, should I get more detailed? The answer is usually yes, get more detailed, okay? All right, so I'm gonna stop there for today. Thank you all for your time. I will make sure to publish the links for you to submit your drafts. I will do that right after we're done with class. It'll be just like mini essay 1. You will have 2 links that you need to submit them to, the Turnitin link and the graded rubric link, okay? You should see both of those today. Please email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Yes, take care.
So the draft